Ah! Oh, no, all right. So you really, I need a few more chocolates before I can do this one. I've been so sick. I can't tell you how it's been like an entire week of lying in bed, hitting like yet another video on Amazon Prime. I love Amazon Prime so much. Like you can just keep streaming and streaming and streaming, like having Bonbons over and over and over again. And let's see, I managed to watch, I don't know, I lost count. It was like movie and movie and movie, and it's so great. It's so great. All you have to do is go in and say Cary Grant. You get all of these different movies to choose from. I only choose the romantic comedies. I'm not that interested in the Hitchcock because I didn't want to be sad. And then I found Doris Day. Doris Day made a lot of movies. Watching one last night about a circus, and it's got elephant and everything in it. Dog, these are not for you. I could sit there and watch movie after movie after movie after movie. You guys should join us and learn what we learned, or I learned, or somebody learned in the deep dive into the romantic comedies. Welcome to the Mosaic Arc. Okay. Ooh, you want one of these?
Yeah.
So I should need all of them. They're actually like office party gift from my husband's work, which is totally like topical to our continuing rom-com things tonight. You watch any rom-coms?
I did a little binging. I had to follow you into Cary Grant territory for a couple of hours.
It could go on forever. How many movies did these people make?
I have to stop myself, otherwise you just get into a tunnel because, there are so many of them.
Well, so I was keeping myself very tightly to Hays Code territory, right? So it had to be what, 1934 to 1968, something like that. I'm gonna have another chocolate. Stop.
She's been really sick. This is terrible.
Oh.
So, can you explain what the Hays Code is for anyone who doesn't know what the Hays Code is?
Are you wanting me to think logic? You asking me about chronology and history, and you think I looked it up and made notes for today?
Now you know how I feel.
I'm starting. I'm thinking. I've tried to discover my inner woman over the last week. Right? It's like I lie in bed, and people bring me medicine, and I had to get up and get the chocolates myself because I keep stealing them from people. And what this is this what ordinary women feel like all the time, that you're not actually worried about, wait, no, but isn't it a kind of dream? You don't have to keep to a schedule. You just have a nice man who's working and taking care of you, and he comes home and he brings you chocolate, and
yeah, you're living the dream. She says as she sips on some
it's been like a dream for days and days and days, and nothing but Cary Grant and Doris Day and maybe Rock Hudson. Apparently Doris Day and Rock Hudson were friends. I looked that up. I can do a little gossip if we go there. You still want me to tell
Oh,
them about what the Hays Code is, don't you? Tell me about what.
Well, just for context.
Well, context is why would I be looking only for Hays Code films? Read my mind.
Well, possibly because you're looking at what they managed to slip into movies that are adhering to a censorship code. Maybe
you clearly have not. No, that's not at all what I wanted to do. I wanted the censorship. I was sick. I wanted romance. I wanted pretty dresses. I wanted, it's like I don't think I started with Doris Day. I started with a lot of Audrey Hepburn, maybe, or and every single one of them, Hepburn was dressed a lot by Givenchy, right? I wanted women in beautiful clothes being taken care of by tall, handsome men. So I wanted that. I wanted code. I wanted censorship. I thought I was promised, thanks to the code, that I would be watching nothing but married couples being faithful to each other.
Happily married couples being completely faithful to each other.
That's what I wanted. I wanted marriage and fidelity and children, and the code promised me this.
Were they all wonderful trad wives who had no ambition besides the kitchen and babies?
I thought that's what I was getting. I mean, I grew up watching Bewitched.
Protect us from 14.
I lost you there. Protect us from.
Oh, I said, did the code protect us from 14th Amendment women?
I mean 19th.
19th. Sorry.
I thought it would. I really, really thought it would, and I'm weeping into my glass now. It didn't. I'm devastated. The code was more like guidelines.
The pirates strike again.
They did. Shall I tell you some of the horrors that I saw? Horrors. Yes. It was horrible. I'm not sure I can do it. Tell me what the Cary Grant one you watched.
Oh, so Dream Wife. That was the first one that I watched out of your Hays Code.
Oh, okay.
Selection.
So maybe we should sort of set these up, and then tell them about that, right? So I'll okay. The way I found, like, the way I found my movies in Amazon Prime is I figured this is Hollywood of the star system, right? It's Hollywood of if you get a Cary Grant movie, it's going to have Cary Grant in it. Okay, that's a little simple, right? But it's going to have typecast characters doing their. What's funny is, so one of Casey in one of our chats today was saying, which is your favorite Cary Grant movie? Like, I have no idea. I only watched the ones that he was all the same in, right? And then if when I ran out of Cary Grant movies that weren't Hitchcock movies, I started watching Doris Day movies, and I found there was occasional overlaps. I think I missed the actual Doris Day Cary Grant overlap. I need to go back and watch that one. But then I found out Doris Day is often in movies with Rock Hudson, and there's always jokes in the Rock Hudson movies that he looks like Cary Grant or vice versa. It's like clearly these people were all interchangeable, sort of. But and you can just watch over. So this is but a mere sampling of the 20 odd movies that I managed to find by this serious scientific method of going by date and actor and actress. And for example, there's one, Rock Hudson and Doris Day in Pillow Talk, which
oh yes,
oh yes, with Tony Randall, who I thought, he always gets to have the sort of comic character in the. Would you like to guess? Oh wait, you watched that?
I didn't like that movie.
Why not? It's a romance.
No, I did. I don't know. A few things about it bothered me.
Yeah. How about the fact that well, wait, what bothered it? But what bothered you about it?
The catfishing.
I don't even know what that means. What's catfishing?
So, catfishing is when people are on the internet pretending to be someone else.
Oh, that's right.
To hook someone in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did they have
so,
the internet
like,
when this
is
one
like
was
the
made? I
original
thought this was it's in color, so you know what? Catfishing, really?
This was this was Technicolor. So yeah, it was funny because I was watching this. I thought, oh my god, this is catfishing before the internet when they only had landline telephones.
Catfishing before the internet. Okay.
Yeah, well, the whole idea is that the two main characters are a man and a woman, Doris Day and Rock Hudson, who are sharing this party line, which is a telephone connection that they both have to share. I mean, that alone was funny. To sit there and watch their frustration of having to share a phone line. It's like looking at a completely different universe, isn't it? And so they're eavesdropping on each other's phone calls, and then Rock Hudson devises a scheme for a lot of reasons to try and get this woman under the pretext of pretending to be a completely different person and using a different accent. So he's catfishing her, and it was infuriating as I was watching it.
He catfishes her as a Texan. That infuriated me. His Texas caricature
accent.
As well as Hollywood ever does with Texas accents. Yeah, that was hilarious. And the thing, the party line, you realize later in the way it's not even, they're not even in the same building. It's not like they had I don't even understand the problem, the tech problem of the party line. But yeah, okay, so she's listening into his calls. He's always picking up women. She gets mad at him. She has this housekeeper who is always drunk, right? The number of middle-aged drunken housekeepers I've seen over last week. I thought the Brady Bunch housekeeper, she's typecast. She's just not drunk.
What was going on in the 50s? All these people with drunken housekeepers.
Drunken housekeepers. Oh, and how is it that she needs a housekeeper? Does she have a family?
No. No, she was a single professional woman.
Single professional woman. See, I thought
she was
Go ahead.
Strong, independent female.
Strong, independent female who's not going to be taken in except for by
some guy who's catfishing.
But so the catfishing is like, he's Texan, but is that the strength of his catfishing? Is it just that he's Texan?
Good question.
I got confused because there is actually a fishing movie that I watched a few weeks ago. I think not in this binge, that was about fishing, and now I can't remember. I think that was one of the Cary Grant ones, and he's a fisherman who can't fish, right? And this guy, the Rock Hudson character, is the Texan they're all bumbling fools, right? So the professional woman gets catfished by tall, handsome man. We know Rock Hudson. Don't worry about it. This is on-screen character who pretends to be incompetent.
Yes. Okay, so this is what bothers me about it. In order to get her attention, he has to act incompetent.
She doesn't want him as the playboy character, obviously, because she's Doris Day. She's virtuous, right? So she's not going to be crooned over by he's a songwriter, right? He's not going to be crooned over by she's not going to be crooned over him by his song that he is inspired by every woman that he meets and adds her name in. He has to be the honest Texan who needs help in the big city, which then gives her strength to, what happened to strong men sweeping women off their feet? It doesn't seem to happen in these Doris Day movies, that's for sure.
Well, isn't this shocking? Because I thought that's what was happening in the 1950s.
You'd think, from the way we're supposed to have to fight the code, fight the Hays Code time when everybody was, supposedly being forced to be virtuous in the entertainment industry, at least on camera.
Yeah. Well, he pretends to be incompetent, and then gets her attention because he's an idiot, and then I fell asleep. I admit it. About 75% through that movie, because I was in front of an open fire, and I was too relaxed and comfortable. So I don't know what happens in the end.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. We'll go into the next one.
What you've told me.
Like you could tell they kiss. No, the other thing that's interesting about all of these movies end quite abruptly, right? The ending comes and bango. So in fact, you fall asleep even minutes before the end. You're not really sure how it ended. There's There's never any big denouement or anything. Okay, so another one I watched. Then I'm on my Doris Day ones. This one was the Glass Bottom Boat, and she in her opening scene is in a mermaid outfit and gets snagged by the guy who is fishing. So there's more fishing here, but it turns out that he is an astronaut and she actually works at NASA as a tour guide or something, and gets tangled up in all of this because he decides, in fact, to try to catch her, and finds out all about her, and then pretends to like things that she does, and so forth. And it was moderately fun because there's a fair amount of slapstick in it, although a little over the top, right? She's too super clumsy and everything keeps breaking, and NASA decides that she's a spy, etc. Mayhem. I think the guy playing the astronaut guy is Australian, so that was nice.
Oh.
You didn't watch this one?
No, I didn't see that. I saw the trailer.
So I think that
the
this
woman's voice annoyed me, so I didn't watch the film.
You didn't know? Okay, so I told you which ones I'd watch. Pillow Talk got you, and you stayed through 75 minutes of it. The Spy Who Came. It's not called The Spy Who Came Out of the Wave. It's The Glass Bottom Boat. It had some pretty cute songs. Okay, and then another Doris Day one. Now this one, The Pajama Game, is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It was an interesting one. It's got the raciest little. She's got no pajama bottoms on in the poster.
Yes.
It's a bit what do you gather from a poster which has a woman in no pajamas on? If I just tell you that, is this movie about? I mean, Pillow Talk was about his catfishing her and trying to talk her into bed with him.
It just seems like any way of being able to tell everyone they want to get her pants off without saying it overtly.
Interestingly, this one's about a pajama factory. and she is the complaint representative for the union. It's actually a story about the union trying to organize to get 7.5 cents for the hour raise, and she's the union representative. Talk about strong working woman, and her romantic interest in this one is the management, but had worked up from the. So this is actually a labor dispute musical.
So it's left wing, right wing.
Not even that. There's just the bad guy, owner of the pajama factory that has to they have to beat and everything. However, the funniest thing for me about this, there were two things that happened while I was watching it. One, it's a musical, so basically most of it's all singing. And oddly enough, I realized I'd heard most of these songs. I had no idea this movie existed or the show or anything like that. And I'm sitting there going, I know all of these songs, which I'm not going to sing because of my voice. There's one incredibly extended sequence where they have the worker picnic along the river, and they're all polkaing and dancing, and it's a beautiful day, and it's a love song, and there's all this very, very beautiful balletic level dancing, but it's in fact about a union pajama factory, right? The one I'm really wondering why I know this song, because there's one about the Club Hernando's where they have to go and nobody knows their name, and it's like a kind of a Spanish style song, and I knew that song really, really well. I didn't know how I knew it at all, so it somehow seeped into our cultural knowledge, but not fully. And the other thing is, I was watching all these dances, and I thought, gee, and for some reason, just out of the blue, popped into my head Bob Fosse. Now, Bob Fosse was famous to me because he choreographed a very racy movie that I saw in college called All That Jazz. Did you ever see that? Mm-hmm. You did? No.
You mean like Chicago?
No, it's called All That Jazz. Okay. And the trope about it is a guy talking about how he's dying, and so it introduces the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross stages of dying, anger, bargaining, depression, denial.
Oh, the 7 stages of grief.
Yeah,
yes.
it's 5, right? Yes. Anger, denial, bargaining, depression, acceptance, or something like that. And in the midst of it, they're interspersed this attempt to have this show go on this production, and the dancers rehearsing and stuff like that. And that one was all choreographed by Bob Fosse. It's like his masterpiece level. And I'm like, why? When I'm watching the Pajama Game and this wholesome, picnic on the water, and I'm suddenly thinking of Bob Fosse and all that jazz. Pajama Game was his first movie.
Interesting. Yeah. So that was his breakup.
Yes. So now we've got catfishing, we've got working women, we've got the
union labor.
We've got Bob Fosse. I mean, come on, if you've ever seen all that jazz, there's one scene where they're doing this. They're all in body leotards, and they're all like with blood vessels, right? It's very heart pumpy kind of. Oh my gosh, it was so sexy and erotic, and in the story of the film, so incredibly obscene and scandalous that when the dancers perform it for the production people in the movie, afterwards the dancers are all just panting because they've been working so hard, and the promoters of the show are going, we can't use this. And yet there it was in the movie, right? So exactly what has just been happening to us, do you think? And we've set you up for the movie that you did watch, which was The Dream Wife.
Mm-hmm.
Fosse jazz hands. That was the 50s. It's in everything. Yeah. Silent Draco. What? Tell us what happens in The Dream Wife.
The Dream Wife. Well, I chose, that was my first pick of all of your catalog that you've been posting, because I like the idea of this Oriental woman that gets thrown over into America, and I thought, oh yeah, this will have some good bits in it. So Cary Grant is involved in selling hydraulic equipment to a Khan of some kind of Middle Eastern fictional nation called Bukistan, and then ends up proposing marriage to the Khan's daughter. So she has to go over to America and go through this very long engagement. She ends up more and more exposed to American customs because Cary Grant's first fiance, who he broke up with, is a diplomatic career woman who's taken the Khan's daughter under her wing, and so she's showing her all of the strong, empowered, liberated females of America, and giving her American freedom. Showing her that she can be.
Why does the Cary Grant character want to marry her, the daughter?
Oh, because in Bukistan the tradition is that the women have been raised from birth to be absolutely subservient and perfectly hospitable to their men. Mm-hmm. So their entire ambition is to have perfectly happy husbands, and that's the only thing they think about. And everything they're trained to do revolves around pleasing their husbands.
And why does he want that instead of the Deborah Kerr character?
Oh, well, his first fiance, the diplomat, is busy taking a lot of phone calls throughout their date, and very well. She's very strong-minded. She knows what she wants. She tells everybody what she wants and what she doesn't want. She's commanding, and so he's getting tired of it because she's not doting on him, and they're not getting quality time together. And he's impressed by the difference between the Bukistani princess and his American diplomat fiance. So he trades in for the Oriental, and so the whole film is a kind of East versus West comedy, but it's an interesting look at the tension that I've been seeing in the online chat rooms about the behavior of women now, and what men have been complaining about Western women, their loss of femininity, and these kinds of things. So it was interesting to see the same conversation being had in a 1950s black and white movie.
I thought I was watching old movies, and it felt like I was watching now a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
that there was less nakedness.
Yep.
Thanks, code. But
Yeah.
but in terms of the problems that the stories were setting up, it was, I mean, one adult, one adulterous relationship after another, one
Mm.
career woman who's being seduced, or not wanting to leave her career, or I mean, one of the interesting ones is Cary Grant with Betsy Drake, and it's every girl should be married. I'm like, that sounds great, right? And so, but she's a career girl. She's going to set him up so that he gets married. Fun fact, Drake did get married to Grant, and they were actually married longer than any of his other pairings, right? That she was his wife for longer than anybody else. But even the movies that are apparently about getting married, they all tend to end in marriage, or Doris Day gets pregnant, or something like that. But there's the persistent undercurrent of the reason the people meet is because they're already in a professional situation, and it doesn't matter. I mean, I've long noticed this about Katharine Hepburn movies, but all of them are like this, right? All of these, I did not find. Well, actually, no. The only one I found where the woman is like staying at home and having a family allegedly is Cary Grant and Deborah Kerr in another movie where they're running the family stately home in England as a business, and Robert Mitchum comes in and she has an affair with him, right? There's a duel. It's good. It was I did not see any, I couldn't, maybe that's why everybody watches It's a Wonderful Life, because it's the only one. Where are the wholesome movies? There weren't that many to choose from, apparently.
Well, this wasn't, this wasn't wholesome. Dreamwife was, it was really creepy. I mean, he dumps his first fiance. She doesn't even look sad about it.
Nope.
I mean, did you notice this? They have an argument in front of someone else in the house, and then she walks out and they've just dumped each other. They were supposed to be getting married a week after that date. So they dump each other. The day after, he's already on the phone trying to get this Bukistani princess to marry her instead and trade up. No one looks sad. So they're just sort of emotionally psychopathic people. Like, if you take away the wholesomeness of the aesthetic, no one looks upset about anything. He's just decided that he wants a different model of female. Mm-hmm. It's like it really was like I'll just get it mentality. So he goes to get the Oriental femoid instead of this American one. American woman's not even upset. Then they bring the import in. So he's got his mail order Bukistani bride who comes with a dowry of like all of the goats that her father.
The goat dowry was good, yeah.
The goats and the camels and everything. He's not allowed to touch her. That was very good. I thought that was interesting.
But what does he think that's no, remember, he thinks it's a great thing that she has been trained her entire life to make her man happy. Okay. But he's not allowed to touch her, and there's a bodyguard guy with him. How does he consider that?
Oh, he hates it. So he wants the virtue of the Bukistani without the responsibility of keeping her virtuous. In fact, he spends quite a few days after her arrival trying to get into her apartment.
He wants her, in fact, to be like the Western women, even as he's saying that he thinks that he wants her better because she's been trained to serve. Mm-hmm. So it's like from the beginning, he isn't even interested in the fantasy woman that he thinks he said he was. He wants her to be like all the Western women.
Yes, without the arguments.
Right.
So she's kind of imported, even though she's supposed to be royalty. She's imported and then treated more like she's a mail order catalog prostitute in many ways. It's odd. And then because there's a diplomatic problem, because she's a princess and he's going to ruin an oil deal, there's all of this kind of comedic yeah, I know. There's this comedic chaos around them as the State Department is trying to stop him from ruining everything, because if he aggravates the princess's father, the Khan, and the deal is going to be off and America won't get this like amazing oil deal. And so you see them going through the process of this pre-wedding courtship and interacting with each other. But as the princess becomes more and more westernized and Americanized, the ex-fiance diplomat woman starts to dress a little more oriental and begin to behave a little bit more like the Eastern woman that just got imported. So they do a little bit of a switch. And then the American diplomat learns how to interact with the Bukistani Khan the way that a Bukistani woman would. And so you're seeing the behavior of the two women, and basically the whole story is relationships as business deals. That's what was so striking to me about the whole thing. It wasn't actually romance. The way they treated the entire thing was basically business, because he wasn't happy with the terms and conditions that he was getting with the diplomat American woman. So he traded her in for the Oriental, which was still a business deal because the whole relationship factored on this oil trade, so what would appear to be a romance film wasn't very romantic at all. There was no romance, no chivalry.
Well,
nothing. It was business.
It was ironic to me because I'm thinking I did want to look at dates and I couldn't because I'm not going to, because we're in chocolate land right now. This is around the time that the United States is creating modern Iran in its Shah version, I think, right? So there is some layer of, here's the U.S. State Department. I mean, it's interesting how overt a lot of this stuff is, like the labor dispute one, or the NASA one with the mermaid and the spine, or the pill. All of these that it was an interesting sort of deep dive, which I enjoyed, into the history, and they are interestingly blunt about a lot of things. For example, here the United States is trying to pressure the Bukistanis into this deal. They can do it by way of various kinds of diplomacy, and this guy gets caught up in it. So it's like true to the moment and honest in the sort of, in retrospect, you can say, man, they were really doing all of this, weren't they? She ends up being westernized, like I believe the Iranians are in the 50s and 60s, so that you can see the idea and the ideal of, yes, these women should be westernized. That the whole thing. It's like all of these movies are all about women's suffrage. I mean, it's post 1919, but 1920, but it's they're all professional women. It's all renegotiating marriage on the women's terms. So I'm not sure what anybody was complaining about during the code, because none of it is at all traditional.
No,
none of it.
No. There was nothing traditional about what I saw in those two code films. The women are unsupervised. I'm thinking again about Pillow Talk. There's a scene in it where Doris Day is being harassed by this little blonde Harvard boy who's trying to get her clothes off in the car, and then insists she goes to a nightclub with him so he can get really drunk, and he ends up passing out, right? So she's kind of getting Me Too'd in the car. So they're depicting men as unchivalrous and exploitative, even in that context,
right?
There's Doris Day doesn't have a single man in that movie that she's in that is just there for the benefit of being a respectable gentleman. They all want something from her. So the message of that film is essentially, men are all out to get something from you. There is no one who is telling the truth and who is honest and who is going to treat you well.
Right.
Even the star of the film, Rock Hudson, is catfishing her. So even though like the only genuine looking man in the entire movie is actually completely fictional. It's fascinating that anybody would say that was a virtuous plot line. So she's completely isolated, surrounded by horrible men, and it's like Um, no traditional concept of chaperoning or having having her treated like a potential mother. You know, the way that they speak to her is like a businesswoman.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. It was like watching something contemporary.
Well, and the reason I was choosing Doris Day movies is because she was allegedly famous for always doing virtuous characters, right? I mean, she's trying to make the men virtuous. And I was reading about her. She did turn down the role in The Graduate because she said it was like naughty or smutty or whatever. It's like, so, you know, and she stopped acting pretty much after the code went away. So we don't have any, you know, Doris Day with her clothes off movies like what Julie Andrews right after The Sound of Music or something. We don't have Doris Day in the 70s destroyed in her image. But on the other hand, the movies that she's in, you know, it's the America's Sweetheart is still America's strong young, you know, strong businesswoman. I the one movie that I found that was actually quite sweet was a circus movie, the Jumbo movie. And I think the same guy who is, I'm not sure if the same one in the mermaid one is in the Jumbo movie one, but you know, but that was like a circus movie. She's working in the circus. So most of the movies that a quote America's Sweetheart that I found that she's making are these woman in the world movies rather than wife and mother movies. I mean, I just, maybe clearly maybe my search criteria were off, but I was wanting romantic comedies, but I was finding that they felt much more like, you know, a claim that you would make now about strong women in their professional lives. And, you know, the only way the men can actually get them is to play stupid. It was Homer Simpson, only, you know, Cary Grant sized.
Yes. Yeah, or Rock Hudson sized. Yeah, it was fascinating because, like, I'll go on the tangent now just to contrast it between the other stories that I like. Because when we were collecting images, I said, oh well, I have to put something in that isn't from the same era. And then I think subconsciously I just wanted to cleanse my palette from this, go back to the Jane Austen days because.
So we have Jane Austen. Well, we have some women looking rather ferocious from a Jane Austen. Talk about Jane Austen.
Yes. Well, the women are not in the workplace in these stories, so like, yeah. So to contrast between all the American strong empowered females that are in romances, which are basically just oddly non-emotional business arrangements. Austen was writing about the complexity of women having to navigate becoming wives and mothers and getting paired off with men even though they weren't emancipated at the time. I think that's far more fascinating, because these were girls which were still very much traditional. They were at home with their parents, you know, like in Pride and Prejudice, the Bennett sisters are all home, so much so that they've been homeschooled, you know, they're home educated. They've never left the supervision of their parents before. And they still go through all of these tribulations with the various men that come in and out of the orbit of the family circle and having to have interactions with them. So I don't know, like if I give an overview of Pride and Prejudice, I just assume everybody's already read the book or seen the films. But the women in those stories were very feminine, even if they're the liberated characters, like the main character Elizabeth Bennet. She's supposed to be the most feminist of all of them,
right?
Yet I find her extremely feminine. I don't know why everyone calls her a feminist. Doris Day was very feminist.
Well, so we got some of the chat that Casey's saying Pillow Talk had a happy ending though when Hudson saw the error of his ways. That will be the typical thing with the Doris Day movies, that she'll eventually get them to be virtuous. She'll, you know, make the men virtuous, but recognizing that her setups are typically, she's already, you know, the character is working. So the virtue is not in not having the women work.
it's also completely demented. You were dating a guy who was lying to you the entire time. You're not just like, oh, well, he had a change of heart, I'll marry him. What kind of sociopathy are you overlooking to have a baby with this guy? Are you mad? She's demented. That film should have ended up with Doris Day in an insane asylum. And like,
having been
honestly,
catfished by the guy pretending to be the.
If you're catfished, exactly. If you're catfished that badly, and then you still end up marrying the dude, oh no, that's enough to want to put an entire population of women on SSRIs. No wonder the West went down. Seriously, it's horror. What a horrible message to send Americans. You overlook all deception and fraud for the sake of a hot 6'6" guy, just because, like, you just got to, you know, that's what it takes. Like, it's a horrible thing to be pushing as a message.
Well, we Silent Draco says The Man Who Knew Too Much, not a rom-com, showed Day his wife, mother, singer. Yes, and that one I have seen. That's one of the. Is it Hitchcock? When she has to sing Que sera sera so that her son hears her and he doesn't get murdered. Fair. I was avoiding the thrillers in all of this. I mean, you could kind of done the Hitchcocks with Cary Grant a bit more. And Casey says, "Please don't eat the daisies." Also shows Day as a happy homemaker. Well, what's funny is, so my mother and I spent Christmas Day watching Home Alone 1 and 2, and that's a big family. You thought that would be good, but of course the premise of it is they keep forgetting the younger kids. So I'm not.
Amazing parenting.
amazing parenting and physical comedy. I find my mother and I have a similar propensity for Wile E. Coyote getting smacked on the head with an anvil.
You like the slapstick?
Oh, it was intense, right? So I like the slapstick in Home Alone better than I thought I would. Casey, women overlook a lot of man's faults for money, if not looks, like Hudson's all the time. Well, this is, we're one, the horror of realizing that, the 20th century is of a piece, and there isn't necessarily this interlude of domesticity necessarily, because from the beginning to end of the Code period, from 1934 to 1968, you can find movies throughout that period that are all about working women. The war movies are about women in the services. The 50s and 60s movies are about them in the workplace. It's an interesting fiction that it's only in the 60s that women are started being represented in the workplace. It's like that's basically what they'd been represented as for the whole time. So talk about the gaslighting, right? Which then takes me back to well, what's going on in Pride and Prejudice? How much of that is what we've been trained to expect it to be, and what isn't it? I mean, Austen never got married. She wrote all those books and helped, and didn't actually get that much money for any of them. So she wasn't even like supporting herself writing.
Lunatic artist.
These videos will be great one day. Anyway.
Well, look, to Austen's credit, that entire film was just an overview of women's options at the time. She wasn't condemning anybody for it either. It was more of an overview of, okay, this is the condition that women are in. Essentially, all of the females in the Bennet family are waiting for men to enter the family circle to then approach them to potentially propose marriage arrangements. And she's going through all of the social consequences of what happens when, they have to consider marriage not just as romance, but as a social arrangement in order to keep the families cohesive. And then you have property and inheritance issues. And then you've got the biological time pressure where, her best friend hits 27 and suddenly everyone's saying, oh, she's got no eggs, you better hurry up and get married because you're 12 months away from being completely untouchable. But there's catfishing in that story as well. So she's got Mr. Wickham, who comes into the family, completely misrepresents himself, lies about everybody, lies about himself, starts to court her. She catches feels. Then she finds out he's a horrible person because he ends up ruining her younger sister by running off and eloping with her, and they have to have a shotgun wedding, etc. And then finds out that the rich horrible man that she thinks is just awful, Mr. Darcy, ends up being amazing because he's got the most noble character of all of them, and fixes up this this horrible elopement, and saves the entire family's reputation from ruin, and makes sure that her and her sisters can get married afterwards, because the family name would have been trashed so badly they would have been untouchable. I like this story. It seems to me that she was writing about the complexity of the social situation, and also saying that it wasn't just about money, it was about character. I don't know. Maybe I saw that story as that kind of positive, like, hopefulness that women may actually be in a position one day to make that kind of choice instead of having to marry for survival. Because they still had a business arrangement attitude towards things even then. It wasn't purely romantic. Elizabeth Bennet was unique because she wanted to marry for love. She didn't want to marry for social protection. So they were still expected to be arranging marriages for that.
Well, it's interesting to think that in my mid 20th century rom-coms, none of the women, none of the women characters need to be married for support, because they've already got their own careers, and never in the ones I watch do they seem to be worrying about having children. I mean, they want a man, but they're not necessarily talking about having. I mean, and Doris Day often gets pregnant at the end of the story, but that isn't the feature of her interest at all. I mean, there's a kind of what you're saying about the sort of weird lack of emotional response in a lot of these. Now thinking about it, there's it's not even clear what the emotion is that they're supposed to be going through.
Nothing like love. It looked like they were looking for a monogamous like they were looking for monogamy, but they weren't looking for the establishment of families.
They don't even, I mean, the characters don't even necessarily seem that worried about lifelong monogamy. I mean, there's not a lot of discussion of, oh, I'll love you forever or something like that.
Oh yeah. Well, in Pillow Talk, one of the men, Rock Hudson's best friend, he's been married 3 times already, and he's trying to get Doris Day. He wants her to be his 4th wife.
Right, and they're making jokes about the number of jokes about adultery, and I thought, I mean, this was talking about things that broke my sense of own story, that divorce became common in the United States in the 1970s. I mean, thanks Ronald Reagan, first in California and then around the country, so that, for example, my family was affected. But the characters in these movies throughout the 30s, 40s, and 50s are getting divorced all the time. It's almost sort of matter of fact. Oh yes, what number wife is this? And there's regular jokes about it. I'm like, how are all these? I mean, they're fictional characters in the movies, but how are all these characters presumed to have been getting divorces? One of the first movies I watched in this series was now I don't remember who the actors and actresses were, but the premise is it's a artist whose wife had been one of his models, and they have a little girl who they've gotten divorced, and they're having to give the girl custody, so she's 6 months with the dad and 6 months with the mom, and they have to trade her out, and the girl doesn't like this, so she tries to get her parents back together, which I think happens, but I kept falling asleep even though I tried watching it a second time. And that one it's in black and white. It's so it's fairly old, and I'm like, how common was divorce at the time? Even thinking about, it wasn't until the 70s that people ended up getting divorced. The movies were showing divorce constantly. Yeah,
so was it reality, or was that a Hollywood propaganda to normalize it?
by the end of it, I'm, starting to realize, but by the time the 70s came around, my parents had grown up with these movies. My parents were born in 1938. They grew up watching these things when they were in high school. By the time they hit their late 30s, they'd seen, one, you see actors portraying multiple relationships, which I think tends to have an effect, right? It's like, which one does Doris stay with now?
Yeah.
But the stories themselves were constantly about not just, adventures and romance, which is what I thought I was getting, but people who are in multiple relationships as a matter of course of the storytelling.
Yeah, it's very odd. I'm just thinking now of like the conservatives, whatever they are, that we talk to a lot, this desire for returning to the trad life. And they'll very often look back to this period as the golden era for American family life. But if these stories are anything to judge by, I mean, they were all childless. There weren't children running around in these, in this vision of the American romance. There is no fertility. It was very, very infertile.
It was.
It was very strange.
So you had at the one poll you had Pride and Prejudice. The other one you said this is Adam Sandler's Wedding Planner. Why did you choose this one? It's the
yeah. Oh, because I think secretly Adam Sandler was trying to save Western civilization.
Oh, all right.
By making this movie, I don't know. Okay, so The Wedding Singer. It's such a silly film, but I love it because it's like a 90s does 80s vintage 80s celebration, so the whole aesthetic is just like 1980s. Adam Sandler is a guy who's a musician working as a full-time wedding singer and has a fiance because he wants to be married, he wants to be a husband, he wants to be a father. His girlfriend is horrendous, leaves him at the altar, and then he goes through having a nervous breakdown, and it's very, very funny. He ends up meeting a waitress who's working in the same sort of company. So again, they meet at work, which is something to note. But they're working in the same company, so she's working for the catering side of things, and so she's waitressing and he's singing, and they get to know each other, and then she's getting married to a guy who works in finance. This is why I think Adam Sandler is trying to save Western civilization, because she's with a guy who's constantly working. He's like he's some kind of investment funds manager. Doesn't have time to plan the wedding, so she asks Adam Sandler if he can help her plan their wedding, and then of course he goes through the process of wedding with her, and they end up falling in love with each other, etc. But her, the lead actress in this is Drew Barrymore, and her finance fiance is horrible. He's sleeping around behind her back, has absolutely no intention of being monogamous once they're married. He reveals this to Adam Sandler when they're out having drinks with each other one evening. So, openly bragging about the fact that he's just marrying her because he trusts her to not be marrying him for his money, which I find really, really interesting aspect of this story. So even though he's not trustworthy, he wants a trustworthy woman. He wants a virtuous woman, even though he's not in turn going to be virtuous with her. So Adam Sandler realizes that this beautiful girl is about to go with this dog is going to ruin her life, and essentially he's like, oh, I can't let, and talks to her best friend who tells him that you can't wreck this relationship. She's going to marry him and he's going to provide everything she needs. Women need the provision, they need the status and the security, so, and you can't offer that to her, so just leave her alone, leave her be. So they go through this like this struggle, and he's suddenly going, all right, I'm not going to be a wedding singer anymore, I'm going to go work for a bank. But it's a kind of interesting thing because uh it's like he's involved in culture, he's involved in the celebration of life, the celebration of the creation of family, and then it's like that kind of person versus someone in finance who's not interested in virtue, doesn't want children, so he's not interested in fertility. It's like the sterility of the finance world versus actual culture and actual life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I liked about that story. Of course, lots of things happen. Adam Sandler ends up racing to rescue her from a Vegas shotgun wedding, and then eventually gets her. And yeah, it's a great ending. But actually romantic in the sense of the stories that I thought I would be seeing when I was watching those Code films. There is a lot of emotion, but there's also discussion on like what it means to create a family.
Mm-hmm.
The lead character in the Wedding Singer is living still with his brother and his wife, so there's like this extended family experience, and everyone was sort of saying, oh, you're still living with your brother and blah blah blah. But it's kind of like old Catholic situation where it's like multi-generational households, everyone's there, he's working, trying to save money to get his own career going, and wants to build the family structure versus this other guy who just wants a good woman that's not going to marry him for his money. So it's an interesting story, and actually romantic. Yeah.
So this is making me wonder. It's like maybe we've grown up. I've grown up with more romantic movies by seeing the ones that were being made during maybe it's the 80s. Maybe what I'm actually longing for, because Crocodile Dundee. I like rewatching that one. I mean, it's fine that she's a Sheila and everything, and he lies to her about how many times he's taken people out to his hut in the wilderness. But on the other hand, he's like there to defend her and so forth. I mean, the sort of romantic stereotypes seem to fit better with, I don't know, the 80s than the 50s. How is that possible?
Was chivalry somehow trying to emerge from from the West in the 80s?
This could explain a lot. I mean, it's like Excalibur came out right in 82 or so. I do think this is an interesting sort of problem. And when exactly is the fantasy that we're apparently trying to live according to? When is it created as opposed to when is it projected onto? So we've got in the 80s, like Back to the Future, right? Projecting on to the 50s, the fantasy of going back and getting your parents together at the prom dance in high school, right? Mm-hmm. But the things that the people were watching in the 50s are not that. They're not watching about how I'm going to meet my love at the prom night.
Yes. Well, maybe that's what happened. Reagan allowed divorce. Divorce started becoming legally normalized instead of Hollywood normal. And all of the 80s kids were hungry for chivalry and traditional courtship.
Which now we're trying to figure out whether it ever, did it ever actually exist? One hopes it did. But no, seriously, it's like I'm at my mom's house. I came down with this, stupid cold, and I'm wanting to watch stuff that's going to feel, sort of glamorous and fun and restful. And so I am obviously picking the movies that seem to have fun locations or, nice settings or something like that. Could have watched the Waltons, I suppose. I remember growing up with that, but that it didn't have the chivalric character that I have always been told, belong to those periods. And that those are the movies that came out before I was born and never showed on television. Allegedly, when I was growing up, or I never saw them, right? When I was growing up, by the 70s, they have the sitcom Love American Style, which was, basically all about, pick up artists kind of thing. It's like the Love American Style is the scene, right? The disco and things like that. And to find out, I mean, this is probably not a wildly novel observation, but to recognize that often the fantasies that we're hoping to live by, A, never existed, and B, they're closer to what we have actually ourselves been living than we thought. How's that? We're more romantic than we realized.
Well, that's a nice thought, because everyone is blackpilling about interactions between men and women at the moment.
Yes, constantly. I mean, so we're back with the pillow talk, and they're on the telephone, right? I love the
Yes.
my framing on these pictures is not great because they're this way, and I've only got this space to show them. But this is what Kilts was describing, that, you know, there's Rock Hudson on the phone with Doris Day, and the sort of cleverness in the way in which they film these things where they're not allowed to show people in bed together. So they show people in bed together by putting them both on the phone together. Right? So they're in, you know, in bed together talking on the phone to each other, and you're supposed to feel that this is really racy. Well, just wait till you see the next way they cut this. So they do this. She's lying down on the bed, and he is in the inset image on the top of the screen, lying on top of her. Oh yeah, I'm sure somebody got a bunch of giggles out of that.
Oh, they did a similar thing with the bathtub too, where they had the split screen and they were both in the bath and the phone.
Yeah, so they're being racy and stuff about showing, you know, they're in bed together, but, you know, on the phone with each other. But I wanted us to talk through some of this, because you've been telling me about your adventures in the discussions. Can you talk more about what you've encountered and what's frustrating about them?
I quit chats. I just decided, like, I think it was last week, the week before, I've quit a bunch of chats because this is the Andrew Tate apocalypse era now.
Yep.
This is, you know, it's all sort of bubbling underneath everybody's fury with the state of our culture right now. And talking to a lot of people that are, you know, they want to be traditional, they want to go against modernity, they're unhappy with the state of women being completely over emancipated in the workforce, and they hate feminism, blah 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 blah, and yet I have absolutely no idea how to talk to women. Absolutely no idea. Not even in a chat room environment where it's like we're all kind of on the same page with a lot of things. There just seems to be nothing but fury at the the lack of Bukhastani style male veneration in Western women. And that's what I found really interesting watching that particular movie, because it seems like a lot of guys that I was talking to have this vision that Western women were like Orientals in these Orientalists Rom Coms. That once upon a time in the golden age, before we were in the office, we were always completely doting on them. Perfectly obedient, perfectly submissive, had absolutely no ambition to do anything outside of their home, etc. And then added on top of that is the fury that they have at the war on masculinity. So we've got somebody like Andrew Tate out now, who's just been recently arrested in Romania for allegedly sex trafficking women. Even though he's admitted to being a cam girl pornographer. So we go back to pillow talk again. Tate was like Rock Hudson on steroids in the sense that, you know, he's setting up catfishing operations to hustle all of these guys out of their money by having women that he's groomed and manipulated into falling in love with him, then go on and work as sex workers for him to make money for him. And he said that he put them on screen and had them typing on a keyboard that wasn't plugged in while he was in the back doing all of the typing and telling all of the stories to the boys that he needed to tell them in order to, you know, hustle them out of all of their money. So I've got two thoughts that are running at the same time, but like the Rock Hudson archetype of catfishing on the phone is kind of it's never ended. It just kept going. But it got worse. It went to Romania, and that's become a lot of people's vision of virtuous masculinity.
This is making no sense to me. You're going to need to talk me. I had not heard of Andrew Tate, maybe dimly, until like 3 days ago or a week ago or whatever.
He was extremely obscure until he went on Tucker Carlson, and then he did a Piers Morgan interview.
Ah, okay.
Because he had a pyramid scheme. So it was like he had thousands of guys that were posting about him on social media to push him into the algorithm.
Got it.
And because he was saying a bunch of vaguely true things, vague truisms about the state of our culture and censorship and everything, he ends up on Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan. And he's presented to the culture as this incredible alpha male rebel against the feminist West and the emasculated men of Western culture. So that's where he sort of emerges and then instantly gets arrested. And a lot of the guys on the internet were saying, oh, they're trying to take him down because he's telling the truth, which I just found really odd, because he wasn't. He made his money literally by not telling the truth, right, and by pretending to be cam girls. So, I mean,
which fits with the Rock Hudson character in Pillow Talk when he's it does. The conversations that Doris Day keeps overhearing with him are he's talking to yet another woman that he's trying to get into bed by pretending to be writing songs for her. So Andrew Tate's working in real life in a long tradition of seducers. Yeah, like the pickup artistry thing. Yeah. It's a long tradition. And I find it really fascinating that this is the kind of masculinity that's been pushed to it's been fake deplatformed, but platformed and presented to all of the young men now as the solution to feminist takeover. You have to be like this. This is like this is the masculinity they're trying to destroy. But obviously it isn't. If this is the kind of masculinity that got Doris Day in that film, this is actually Hollywood's version of alpha male. Right. Very much so in this Pillow Talk. Yeah. I'm gonna unfortunately make you sad about Pride and Prejudice, but it's not about Pride and Prejudice as such, right? Jane Austen was a great writer and very delicate in her scathing descriptions. I think when I first read Jane Austen, I didn't fully appreciate how amazingly strong she is as a writer. It's like this little pin flourish of what apparently is simply straight description is this whole layers of social commentary. She's delightful. I mean, and Northanger Abbey is of course hysterical when she's sending up all of the Gothic romances. But the imagining of, like, in her moment when she's writing that what she's describing is traditional. When you're talking about Andrew Tate and his schemes and his alleged schemes and his pickup artistry and stuff, I think he's been outclassed many times, but most famously, and if he ends up in prison, he can follow the instructions that in fact the man I'm about to mention could have given to him about what you do when you're in prison. For example, imprisoned in Venice under the roof and in the leads because you've seduced an entire convent of nuns. Oh, well, if you're Casanova, you're going to end up reading Maria de Agreda Mystical City of God, because the Inquisitor only gives you that or the Sacred Heart meditation, and you think the Sacred Heart is crazy, so you're going to read about this crazy nun who is, having conversations with the Virgin Mary, so she's completely nuts. You have no idea, modern Western men, how effective Casanova was at talking himself into every single court in Europe, every single money-making scheme. He manages to talk the King of France into a lottery scheme that, He ends up I don't think he ends up in prison more than once. I can't remember.
Casanova's crypto, that's fantastic.
Andrew Tate, if you're listening and you want to have something to read if they send you to prison, ask for Casanova. It'll keep you going. For volumes and volumes and volumes. I think it's like 12 volumes of memoirs, right? Which Casanova writes or imagines at the end of his life in 1798 or thereabouts, after he survives the French Revolution. We don't know how. As philosophy, right? He's going to, as a philosopher, describe his, sort of self-discovery through basically all of these adventures, which include some pretty racy scenes, I tell you. I was reading it as research for figuring out bits to assign to my class in History of European Civilization, and I think it would count as porn.
So it wouldn't have survived the Hays Code.
Oh, well, the woman that he ends up, this is just in the first half of the abridged version in the library, American Library Classics, or I don't know which version it was reading, where this woman who's been traveling around pretending to be a young man, he's trying to have sex with her as a young man, and then she has to confess that the penis that she has isn't real. 18th century, people, you're gonna be amazed. This is the milieu in which, of course. Go ahead.
That's not even like he got catfished by a trap. He wanted the lady boy.
Yes.
Who ends up not being the lady boy.
Or vice versa. I can't remember which way it went, but it's like, no, I think it was she was pretending to be a boy because I can't remember. But it's truly, if you any scenario you can imagine, Casanova's already done it. And if he didn't, his contemporary and fellow philosopher, the Marquis de Sade, definitely did. So it's like when Jane Austen is writing, she is writing actually against a lot of this stuff. Northanger Abbey with it, against the Gothic romance that were popular in the late 18th century. She is inventing a virtue that hadn't been there, much as we could say Adam Sandler is trying to do. And the ones you like are actually the ones that are trying to invent virtuous stories out of a morass of sin and philosophical self-justification for their adulteries in the pride. So maybe this is consoling. It's not new. Again.
So I'd like to rephrase this romantically. What you're saying is, I like people that are trying to transcend the sluts and whores of their particular generation to create something beautiful. Okay. Yeah.
But it does leave us. So here we have Doris Day, and this, I think this is the different one. It's still, that is Rock Hudson, isn't it? She's lying on this is another one where they revise the same sort of problem in Pillow Talk, but he has to pretend to be like too embarrassed to have sex, this character. And so he's going to seduce her. He tries seducing her by, saying, I'm too ashamed, I can't do it. And so she talks herself into believing that, she's going to give up her virtue to help him gain his self-confidence. It's too much.
I would have if I was in charge of the code, I would have banned that movie. Or demanded a different outcome at the end. Oh man. That's so bad.
But okay, but this is the Doris Day and Rock Hudson were apparently good friends. I didn't read up all of the gossip stuff about how, I think they were just like friends, right? So that's fine. But that the sort of quintessential version of the American romance of the mid-20th century, Doris Day's America's Sweetheart, is the strong woman dealing with the awkward, confused or pretending to, I mean, he's catfishing her again, right? Confused man who she gets to, feel more knowledgeable than, or something like that. I did watch some French ones. They tend to go a different direction.
I do things a little different in Europe. No, that's just like, it's proving my thesis correct, that there's been a long damaging tradition of men getting free affection and free respect. If she was willing to give him her virtue so that he would increase his confidence, he's earned nothing. That's the ultimate freebie.
Yes, and she's in this beautiful little bubbly dress. It's like glittery and everything, and she's talking herself. They do end up, I think at the end of that one, they end up, she's pregnant and they get married and stuff like that. But in this scene, she's talking herself into it being virtuous to help him get over his shyness about his sexuality. But just saying, what American women in the mid-50s were too scared of, strong masculine men. This could have been made yesterday. Allegedly.
Yeah.
Apparently American women have been afraid of strong, what happened to John Wayne characters? And of course, Clint Eastwood characters are always, they're off, straying back off into the sunset or something. So I'm not sure. But it's interesting how much the myth of the period that we have, that we're supposed to be not wanting or wanting, doesn't exist even in the movies that are apparently supposed to be the carriers of that myth.
It is. I'm wondering why this was the ideal, or this was the status quo, if it was. Why they were scared of having men in the lead, like truly in the lead.
Right. Well, they're clear. So they're making these movies to get women to watch them, presumably, right? These are the romantic comedies, so you're going to get the female audience, and they have this sense that having Doris Day playing these, athletic, and she's very slender and beautiful, and I get their stunt doubles in the circus one, but that it's or I wasn't watching like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, but their dances and there's elegance and there's such like that. But the women in all of these American movies are all assertive and self-confident, and the men are there to be like sidekicks for their self-confidence almost.
Yeah, they're side characters.
This is I've switched now. Here's another of the Doris Day. This is Doris Day with her counterpart in the Pajama Game movie, where she's going to have to stand up for the union no matter how much he says he loves her. And of course, the drama of it is that she is in fact going to stand up for the workers' rights, as opposed to recognizing that he needs, he as the manager also has to stand up for the thing that he's supposed to stand up for. And so they split up and then get back together. But the splitting up has to be over her, needing to be the complaint manager for the union, which is, it's garment work. So a lot of women are in it, but.
So is this the American empire needing to fictionalize and get American women to identify with the workplace as their husband, as the primary like masculine authority in their lives is the workplace?
It seems to be over. So Silent Draco saying, ask the writers who were not strong, confident men. Casey, 1950s Hollywood seemed to work hard at convincing women to take the lead sexually and in business. They sure did. Way more than I had expected in making this little journey. Silent Draco saying Tate might suicide after reading it, feeling his own inadequacy. Well, but he'd, be philosophical about it by the end of reading Casanova. Casey saying this is the decade the feminine mystique was published. What I mean, what but sort of the claim of the feminine mystique is that everybody's stuck in the suburbs, which of course Frieden wasn't. But
Mm.
that it's it's not, it's hardly Frieden on her own that's creating this image. I mean, all these movies are set very typically in New York, so they get the glamour
Mm.
of the big city. I mean, even the Pajama Game is really set in a New York factory, I think.
So it is the Empire. It's like Empire State vision of American life. It's New York, It's not the rural South.
Well, so I guess I was consciously not watching westerns, which I'm more familiar with, and I would say maybe the sexual relations of the westerns, perhaps it's where it lives, right? The sort of fantasy version of the strong man who can fight off the either fight off the Indians or fight off the bad guys. Um, the South, as such, things like the hillbilly South. I mean, there's in the television culture a series of those 1960s, 50, I guess they're 50s, 60s. The things like Petticoat Junction and the Beverly Hillbillies, and there's a few others that, or maybe Andy oh, what's I can't remember what his name is. The kid, the scene is they all start going off fishing. There is a sort of period when the television series will show the South kind of affectionately, but all of those shows are canceled about the same time in the early 70s. We're not really allowed to have
Mm.
in the United States a positive image of the South.
Interesting.
But these movies that the sort of version of things that I was looking at, they're all set in the city. They're all set in this professional high life.
Mm.
Not that aristocratic, right? Most of the characters are. I mean, one of the fun Christmas ones we watched over the not in this set when I was sick, but it happened on Fifth Avenue, which is a kind of sweet story about the hobo and he collects the people around him over Christmas living in the mansion. But it's another sort of I mean, challenge to business. There's a number of challenge to business movies, I guess, like the Pajama Game.
Mm. I find that really interesting. That they weren't making stories about love independent from industrial relations of some description or the workplace of some description. Because to me, that means the culture, even at that time, was not creating stories about love independent of the money power. The influence of professional life, and having a distinction between the family and the manager, having a distinction between your family and your boss, this division between the private world of the family and the professional world that was supposed to exist in order to support and feed and provide for the family. Everything happens in that world of work where women are not mothers, because they don't have children in that world. You can't bring a child into that world. There are no children in an office. I find that very odd.
Well, as we're thinking about it, I'm thinking it's like in the TV land, you have things like the Dick Van Dyke Show, which had Mary Tyler Moore at home as the mother. The counterpart to the Mermaid NASA movie that I watched, I think would be something like I Dream of Jeannie, where the astronaut finds Jeannie and she stays home and is a is a housewife, or Bewitched, right? Where, and that one being the premise being Samantha has to give up her. I mean, Darren's always wanting her to not to do the magic, and she's trying to be a
Yes.
good housewife by not doing the magic, but she always ends up using the magic. That's, her professional abilities are. So insofar as there is an image of domesticity, it's coming out, in fact, perhaps more in these television series than it is in the movies.
Yeah, like the Addams Family.
Or the
Similar
Addams
thing.
Family and the Munsters, right? Those are both late 60s. Those, I think they both run in the late 60s. Around the same, and they run together, right? It's like the Addams Family is the aristocratic family, and the Munsters is the working family, and then people divide up over which one of the series they like better. But they ran for about the same amount of time, at about the same time. I mean, exactly like the same years.
Is it interesting though, because the women in those all four of those series, Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, Munsters, and Addams Family, they're mythological characters. They're not real women.
Right.
You have to be a witch, a genie, a vampire, or a very committed goth in order to stay home with children. But not a regular normie female.
But maybe we'd say, okay, so we could keep adding images here of something like Lost in Space, where the whole family goes off in space. So it's the Family Robinson, or I thought of another one, or like, so then I've done previous deep dives and sort of moments of relaxation and rest, and watching the Partridge Family from the early 70s, or the Brady Bunch. You realize the Brady Bunch, we mentioned that because they had the housekeeper, right, who was clearly modeled on all of these previous movie housekeepers, although Alice doesn't seem to be getting drunk most of the time. The Partridge Family, I found, is strikingly just as disturbing as all of these movies, because one, she's widowed, right? So it's a single mom. The Mrs. Partridge, a single mom taking care of the family. And many of the plots that they're in are, it's early 70s, so there's I can't remember if there's any war activism. One of the better ones is they go to Detroit and have to help the local black club earn some money so that they can stay open, because when Reuben has booked them, but Reuben is he's not a proper husband because he's just their agent, right? So he can't actually take care of the family in the man's role. He's booked them in a place where they can't perform unless they help the locals out, right? And recognizing that the 70s is doing that, the early 70s are doing that quite consciously in their scripting. The more I watch, the more I cannot find the time in which our American media has not been subversive of allegedly traditional culture, unless they're monsters, right? Unless, as you say, they're goths or vampires or witches, or
well, it puts it in the realm of fairy tale then, doesn't it? I mean, it basically proposes that the only way that this can exist is in fairy tale and not in reality, because in the real world there is no patriarch at home. In the real world there is no masculine central pillar of the family that is very much a part of the home life. It's only in fairy tale. You have to be you have to have a genie or a witch or a goth or a vampire. What does that do psychologically to an entire society? Never having a very strong masculine patriarch as a part of that home situation. Because I'm thinking now, I go fast forward into my peak epic patriarch archetype, which is the Godfather. I rant about it all the time. But how different is that in comparison to all of these different romantic relationships? The depictions of the ideal trad romance, where you've got all the working women and then a man who's incompetent or pretends to be incompetent in order to get the woman. The Godfather is the complete opposite. Women are at home, central focus is family life, and the only way the men can get at them is if they integrate into patriarchal structure and prove themselves worthy enough to stay in that patriarchy and take care of the women that are a part of the patriarchy. And then they're depicted as criminals and murderers, and it's like, I find that really interesting.
Well, so what would we say is,
if you want to be trad Catholics, you have to be gangsters.
Well, you just blew. So if you want to be trad, you have to be Catholic.
Yeah.
So this one, the still that I'm showing now is from Gigi, right? And this is the opposite version of things that, the French movie where she's growing up with her courtesan aunt, the great aunt, and her mother is a singer, right? So you never see the mother; she's always just practicing her songs, and it's like the grandmother, she's living with the grandmother, and the great aunt is trying to train her how to be a proper courtesan, right? And she in fact doesn't want to be, and she wants to then, therefore have the romance that she does. And I must have fallen asleep because I don't remember how it played out, right? But there's there was a lot of elegance and beautiful Edwardian turn of the century dresses and things like that in it. But the problem that she had to start with was how not to end up a courtesan, how in fact to end up the virtuous young woman that this nobleman is going to fall in love with. I think he has to make some provision so that he can actually be with her rather than not just take care of her, which is what the usual arrangement had been.
That's interesting. So the switch between business arrangement to romance.
Casey says, as soon as Gigi comes of age, Gaston is banished from the house until he agrees to court her properly. Yes, well, she's sort of grown up, like having him as her playmate, that they play cards and things like that, and then Gigi grows up, and now. But the thing is, I think the Casey, you can correct me if I admit I've seen all of these, A, in a blur, and B, sick. So, the great aunt is actually sad that Gigi doesn't want to accept Gaston's arrangement to have her as his mistress, which I think neither Gigi nor Gaston want. But the sort of scandal in this one is that Gigi wants to, in fact, be properly married, but she's poor, so how can he do that? He has to, give up his aristocratic expectation of marrying someone his own social class.
Then we get into hypergamy.
Oh wait, we got some more slides here, right? See, where are we going now? Oh, here we have.
That's the other thing.
This is Cary Grant with that's Betsy Drake, I believe, who he did actually marry, and so they're in the she's dressed up to try to she's trying to pretend that she is somebody that he would want to be with, and interestingly in real life she did persuade him, so that's nice. So the which way do we go? I'm trying to get to the last one she gave me. There we go. The ladies in their diamonds.
Oh, okay. Gentlemen prefer blondes.
Yes.
So should I
talk about that? Yes.
Talk about why I chose that.
Yes.
Because it's a beautifully honest look at the necessity of gold digging in Western culture.
I mean, they're the opposite of everyone we've been talking about. Is these professional women who are not, it's like Doris Day taking pity on Rock Hudson characters because they're clumsy. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Marilyn is feminine as no one else because she's not interested whatsoever in helping men at all. Doesn't care. Has no, there's no free affection. No free affection, no free respect. She's very black and white. It's very easy to get her attention. So in this story, her name's Lorelei. I forget her friend's name, but they're two. They work, but they work as performance. They're artists. They dance and they're singing in nightclubs as entertainment. So not really ambitious in the same sense of, working in a corporate environment or in an office environment. And both of them are unmarried, and both want to get married. Marilyn Monroe's character is engaged to a guy who is very wealthy, and the girls are going on a cruise, and they're on their way to Paris so that she can get married. But her fiance's father is not very happy with the arrangement because she's not wealthy at all. She's got no money. And he's unhappy about the arrangement because he thinks that she's just marrying his son for the money. So in the background, there's a lot of scheming to get the wedding cancelled. And the girls go on this cruise. They're on the way to France. And you see throughout this cruise Marilyn Monroe's relationship to wealth and how shameless she is about admitting that she loves money. She's only interested in giving her attention to men with money. So there's this funny scene where she's talking to a gentleman who's introduced to her, and she starts to have a vision as someone's telling her that he owns a diamond mine in South Africa. And suddenly, you see the diamond kind of going over his face and shine, and, he's got her full attention. But it's a really good story. It's a really good look at actually what is happening in a lot of marriage arrangements that people don't talk about out in the open, and what people's expectations are for relationships that they don't talk about in the open. Whereas Marilyn's character is completely honest and actually quite virtuous. She's not messing around behind her fiance's back. She's very, very, very loyal.
Mm-hmm.
She's got men throwing themselves at her. They're paying money to the head waiter at the restaurant in the cruise liner in order to sit at the same table as her and her friend. So she's that valuable that men are willing to pay hundreds of dollars in order to sit at the same table as her. But even though they're willing to do that, people are scandalized by her admission that she wants to marry money.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole film is this magnificent, revealing of the hypocrisy of everybody, because her best friend, on the other hand, is denying that that's a factor in the relationship, denying that that's going to be a factor in her choosing a mate. And so she starts talking to a guy who is pretending he's there spying on them, pretending to be another cruise passenger, but he's actually there to wreck the relationship between Marilyn Monroe and her rich fiance, working for the future father-in-law. Anyway, so her friend is going with him because she thinks he's poor, and she doesn't want to be perceived as the gold digger that her best friend is. And Marilyn is telling her, what's the point in not going for someone with money? And she said, oh, that's all you care about. And she said, well, you can, if you had the choice between the two of them, which would be better, someone handsome who loves you with money or someone handsome who loves you with no money? So it's very funny, very, very good overview of this kind of tension. And at the end of the film, the wedding, Marilyn's wedding, is sabotaged, and she's beside herself. She's brokenhearted. Her fiance travels to see her eventually, and they reconcile, and he says, my father's not going to permit the wedding. She said, well, we have to go and talk to him, because if he doesn't get the father's permission, he doesn't get the inheritance.
Right.
So she goes with him to speak to the father, and then has this wonderful monologue where the father says, you're only, I don't trust you, and blah, blah, blah. I don't think you really love my son. And she says, oh, no, I do love your son. And he said, oh, you're only marrying him for his money. And she goes, no, I'm marrying him for your money. So he's completely scandalized. And he's completely scandalized by this. And then she says, well, what's wrong with that? If you had a daughter, wouldn't you want her to have the best of everything? If you had a daughter, wouldn't you want her also to marry someone who had the means to take care of her and give her everything she wanted and make her wildly happy?
Mm-hmm.
So he's sort of going silent because he realizes he's not dealing with an idiot. And anyway, so she manages to kind of flip the conversation on the shame that she's been receiving with her shameless gold digging, saying, I do actually love him, but I would prefer to be in love with a man who doesn't have money troubles so that we can just focus on being in love and not focus on the woes of financial difficulty and poverty, etc. So she's revealing herself to be this ideal romantic. She wants love in the marriage without any of the money worries. So it's quite cute. So anyway, she takes the father off to persuade him, and then eventually he consents to the wedding. So her and her best friend, they end up getting married together. It's a double wedding. It's very cute. But it's a great storyline, because in all of these other situations, you've got the women working who are, in all of the Hays Code movies, you've got all of the women who are working, they're independent, they're embarrassed to admit that they need the man. If there's the breakup, they're not even emotional about it. So it's like they're almost, it was like a psychotic independence. They're financially and materially independent, but they're emotionally and spiritually independent. It's like there was no need for the connection. Whereas Marilyn, she's shamelessly telling everybody she wants complete material dependence, but also she wants the love. I don't know, I just thought it was very cute. It was like, oh, this is actually romantic. There was something genuinely romantic in that story that doesn't exist in all of those other movies. Yeah.
Well, to me, it's always felt that there's this, going back to your in real life online conversations, this kind of strange refusal to recognize that women actually do want men who can take care of them.
Yes.
And that you could say it seems like decades of Evo Psych should have given us an easy answer here. When you are, pregnant or nursing or caring for your children or homeschooling and stuff, you really need a man to be able to take care of you, to protect you from the wolves outside the cave door, as it were. And it was fascinating to me that the I would say Hays Code, I think, gentlemen prefer blondes is in the Hays Code too, but the 30s to 60s movies where these women are portrayed, they don't, none of the ones I found were they at all, interested in the man as anything other than I'm not even sure, right? It's like, now that we've been talking about him, like
the Kendall. They want the Kendall. They don't actually want to provide.
It's a Kendall kind of thing. I'm not even sure what they want, right? It's like, because they're just sort of interested in, he's coming at, the men are all like, sexy and coming after the women and, look at them and are, interested in having them. But the as you've been saying, it's like there's no reason for these people to want to be together other than sex, which we're not allowed to show on camera because of code. So in fact, these movies, which are apparently about these independent women and these Rock Hudson guys pretending not to know how to seduce women, it's still all only about sex. There was nothing, there's no family, there's no love, it's whether or not the two of them can figure out how to get each other to have sex.
Yes.
And they're not really courtships for the most part, at least these ones that I was seeing. And curiously not very emotional about anything. This is a curious place to even. It's like I've spent a whole week sick watching movies with no emotional content. Yeah,
I was struck by that when I was watching Dreamwife. It was like shocking to see zero attempt at portraying the negative emotion associated with the breaking of an engagement. They were up 24 hours later, back to work, back to business as usual.
Mm-hmm. So whose
Very, very
fantasy
strange.
is this, right? You know, this is like, so we'll say we're going to have to go look at the writers, oh my goodness, and the movie producers and the who's making these movies. And the problem that we have of, okay, if the only characters that we can think of, either the Godfather or the Addams Family, are, you know, gothic and weird or Catholic.
I think I found a pattern.
Could it be? Could it be? I mean, what you were saying before about the Empire, yes, it's this. I mean, the Dream Wife was so overtly that. It's the whole relationship that the Bukhastani princess has is going to be for the Americans about whether or not her father signs the trade deal. And you know, the irony of it being that they're portraying the Bukhastani as traditional and she's raised only to please men. But the only reason the Americans care about this is not whether or not she's being used, but whether or not her father will stick with the government arrangements over the oil.
Yes. So yeah, they've accused the Bukhastanis of being backwards, but they're more Oriental than the Orientals. Somehow.
The mirror effect is so intense here. It's like, which way are we looking? Who's being mercenary about what? Yeah. Whereas the 1980s Adam Sandler was they were purely emotional, completely purely, and like zero decisions made in terms of like a business arrangement. It was discussed in the film. They didn't avoid that, which I enjoyed about it. You know, the discussion on the idea that men are supposed to be providing, that was specifically discussed in that movie, to the credit of the producers of the film who put it together, because they show the traps there. You know, it's a very difficult thing to navigate. You don't want to end up with a broke wedding singer who's not able to give a life to you that is secure for the sake of raising children. At the same time, you don't want to be with Greg Goulia, who's the finance guy, marrying you just so that he's marrying someone who's not getting at him for his money. Right.
So he's playing business. You know, it's like the finance guy wants to play business and get a woman who's not playing business. And that's what I liked about that narrative, is it shows that kind of double standard as well, that the men are very conscious of the fact that it is a business arrangement, or the element of marriage being an element of marriage being a business arrangement. But when women are overtly saying this out loud, they become gold-digging whores. Whereas, you know, so women are expected to have this deeply emotional fantasy version of what it's like to be in love and getting married and having the, you know, the white wedding and everything. But the moment they start to project their desire for security, oh, you know, we're getting, you're not very feminine, you know, this is terrible. You break the fantasy then. That I think this is why Gentleman Prefer Blondes was so brilliant, because it was so out in the open, and yet the fantasy wasn't broken because it was admitted in that story that it's a fundamental part of the entire business of getting married. The business of romance is business, yet she doesn't want that to be primarily the reason for getting married. She wants the resources so she doesn't have to think about the resources. Right. It was cleverly done. It was very cleverly done. And not a lot of these movies are discussing this. It's like either the guys are really wealthy and it's like, oh, I don't care, I don't want to discuss it because it doesn't matter to me, which is a load of crap, because they would be. Right. They wouldn't be dating, you know, he wouldn't be the lead unless he was rich. So they disprove their thesis immediately, just by always having wealthy, successful ambitious men as the leads in the films. Wedding Singer had a completely different situation. It was like, okay, we'll get into this. We're going to discuss it. What exactly are we doing here? Is it pure business, or is it pure emotion and pure romance, or is it a little bit of both? And like, how do you navigate this as a culture? Because if you go in either direction, you end up with no wedding. You know, you end up with no families being created, because it's not sustainable, and it's not sustainable in either case. If you're only marrying for business and not love, you're not going to keep the family together. You'll end up with like Reagan levels of divorce. If you're only marrying for love and you can't handle the finances, you won't keep the families together, because families need the finances. They need the provision. They need the protection. So I don't know. It was like, I think Adam Sandler did a good job. Like that movie was a good look at, okay, what are we actually doing here? We've gone through, we've gone through, you know, you've gone through like this period of time in the West where it's like, okay, we're all equal, but we don't want the equality really, because we still want to have the white wedding. We want to have this fantasy of the, you know, the big cake and the dresses and the speeches and everything. But what are we actually doing when we're talking about love in the West now? It was cool.
I realize I have no idea by this point in our discussion. I say, where, no, it's like, where is my idea of romance come from? Because I can't seem to locate it in any of the examples that we've been watching. And I have, you know, I have a very clear fairy tale version of, it couldn't be Disney movies. We know that. As I'm thinking, you know, some of it must come from romance novels. Maybe we need to put, you know, like, is there a genre level here, right? Of it's happening in the stories that women tell each other, or are women being just as dishonest with ourselves, except for Marilyn Monroe's character in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Or wait, yes. No, is this Gentlemen Prefer Blondes?
Yeah.
Okay.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. Yeah.
That somewhere the source of the fantasy version that both the men and the women on the internet are fighting about is now elusive. Could be advertising.
I don't think, yeah, like I don't think that the people that I've been talking to online, I don't think they actually themselves know what they want that isn't fiction somehow.
Right. But we're not even sure now where the fiction is located, except in the Addams Family.
Which I still think is like the magnificent prototype of like trad life. I think it is magnificent. Multi-generational household with a devoted mother who stays home and you know, homeschooled children.
The chat is giving us some ideas. So we have, so Casey saying the finance guy was buying an arm charm. Marilyn was using her charms to get a financially stable guy. What was the difference? Exactly. I mean, I think that's why Kilts is saying the movie makes that. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, Mel suggests, as our ideal. Well, you know, I think we do want to do another stream, not when I'm rom-com full of memory, about Mary. And I brought up Mary and, you know, Casanova reading Mary of Agrada's version of Mary. Maybe there, I was like, where exactly our image of the ideal is coming from is interesting and complicated. It could be something, it could be in, you know, Mary of Agrada's 4-volume story of the Virgin Mary, although that was only translated to English in the 20th century. So maybe. Casey, How to Marry a Millionaire is a good movie to watch for this question. Okay. And then Silent Draco, I can pick an apple all by myself. Oops. Wait. So I think we're in this weird place now of having surveyed one place where we thought the ideal should have been hiding out and didn't find it quite where we thought it should be. it's not in the early 20th century, and it's certainly not under the code, because that's just as much guideline code that they tried to subvert over and over and over again as any other time. And it is interesting, therefore, that these are the famous movies. This is Cary Grant and Rock Hudson and Doris Day, and the ones that got to make movie after movie after movie after movie, right? I could keep going. I still have more of them that I could watch. Maybe this weekend when I'm still recovering. And they made lots and lots of these movies, and yet they're not carrying the romantic premise that we are constantly thinking they ought to have been.
No.
Yeah.
So it makes more sense to me why there was so much rage when I was saying what I was saying in the chats, and also why everybody's been very quick to jump on the Andrew Tate version of masculinity, because I'm not really sure everybody knows which fiction to reference.
Exactly. We don't even know what story we're trying to reference.
Yeah.
Well, that's a stumper. Well, I'd say I've spent my week being under the weather well for this completely disorienting insight. We shall now.
It's kind of appropriate, no?
Yes, coming out of it, finding out that in fact, not only are you in the ghost story now, but you're actually already living the more romantic version of the story than you thought you were from the period in which you thought that they were living the romantic story. That our own longing for this romantic fulfillment and stability in home life, it's interesting. It's really very much ours. So let's think about, as a living breathing human beings who aren't having enough babies.
Oh yeah.
How to cultivate it in our own lifetimes.
Yeah, we've got to figure it out, or we're going to have a population collapse.
I think we're actually already having the population collapse, but seeing it start, it started before I was born in terms of the mythologizing. We better start now. Because to encourage...
We need a baby boom.
What?
We need a baby boom.
We do. And these are baby boomers watching these movies, and they ended up with no baby, not enough babies. So we really, and the storytelling clearly has teeth. So we need to work on figuring out better stories.
I wasn't expecting to come out of this episode blaming Doris Day for the collapse of the American population. But I'm going to do that now.
Que sera. I can't sing it. Que sera, sera. Whatever shall be, shall be. The future's not ours to see. Que sera, sera. Yeah, okay, to be continued. I'm gonna start coughing. I should have another chocolate, just make sure that I stay properly chocolated, right? Don't you think? Ooh, so this is a very disappointing selection. There's only two colors, green and brown. I'll go for a brown one. Yes. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.